This next section we're going to talk about is how to beat the game of blackjack. Now, there's three major areas that you need to learn in order to do this. One is basic strategy. Two is how to count cards. Three is deviations to basic strategy. Now, I personally choose to use progressive systems. That is a choice I'll leave up to you because it's highly controversial. Okay, moving on. Can you do it? Do you really need to be a genius in order to count cards? I will say, no, you don't need to be a genius. However, it does take a lot of practice to be able to do it. This is not something that you can learn and a week or two later go out to the casinos and start beating them. It's going to take 6 months to a year of solid practice to be able to do this well enough. A, to win, and B, not to get caught by the casinos. And speaking of getting caught by the casinos, a lot of people think that card counting is illegal. It is not. You are using your mind to beat the game. However, the casinos do have the right to kick you out. They have the right to bar your play or ban you from life from the casino. Okay, I'm going to go over some basic terminology. Inside the game of blackjack, when you say hit, that means to take another card. When you say stand, that means you're going to stay with the cards that you have. When you double down, you're going to take one more card and actually double your bet. If you get two of the same kind of cards, say you get a pair of eights, you have the right to split them. And the last thing, and we're not really going to discuss this in this video, but there's surrender and insurance. If you want to learn more about surrender and insurance and you can advance your studies more, I would suggest picking up Professional Blackjack by Stanford Wong. This will explain this in great detail. Okay, there's three major categories for basic strategy. One is hard totals, two is soft totals, and three is pairs. Now, this chart that I have up right now is for hard totals. If you have a hand that totals up to 8 or less, you're always going to hit. 9, you're going to double on 3 through 6 or otherwise hit. If it totals up to 10, you're going to double on 2 through 9, otherwise hit. If it totals up to 11, you're going to double on 2 through 10 and otherwise hit. 13 through 16, you're going to stand on 2 through 6, otherwise hit. Oop, I think I skipped over 12 here. 12, you're going to stand on 4 through 6 and otherwise hit. Okay, soft totals. A soft total is when you have an ace card and another card and you can hit again without actually busting. So here's the rules for soft totals. If you have an ace and a 2 or an ace and a 3, you're going to double if the dealer's up card is 5 or 6. Otherwise, you're going to hit. If you have an ace 4 or an ace 5, you double on 4 through 6. Otherwise, hit. Now, ace 7, I put this in red because the ace 7 seems to be the exceptions to the rule. There's a lot of things to memorize with this. Okay, if the dealer's up card is a 3 through 6, you're going to double. You're going to stand on a 2, 7, or 8, and then you would hit on a 9, 10, or ace. Okay, splitting pairs. Up to the top here, if you have 2 aces or 2 8s, you're always going to split. Now, if you've seen the movie 21, they talk about splitting 8s against an ace or a 10 for the dealer's up card, saying that it was a bad idea. This is actually false information. Now, the reason why is because if you have 2 8s and you hit, you're most likely going to bust. Or if you just stand on the 2 8s, that's a total of 16, and the dealer has a 10 or an ace, they're most likely going to beat that 16. So you're almost guaranteed to lose if you don't split the pairs. However, if you split the pairs, you can often end up getting a 3 and then a 10, which will total up to 21. or you can end up getting a 10 for a total of 18. There's a lot of different ways that you can actually survive that round. And a lot of times what will happen is you'll lose one hand and win the other, and it essentially ends up being a push. Okay, so moving on from that, you come down here to splitting 2s and splitting 3s. Against a 4 or a 7 you're going to split, otherwise you're going to hit. Splitting 4s, this is against a 5 and a 6 only, otherwise you're going to hit. Splitting 5s, you never split 5s. Okay, you're going to double on 2 through 9, otherwise you're going to hit. Splitting 6, the dealer's card will be 3 through 6, otherwise you're going to hit. Splitting 7s, 2 through 7, otherwise hit. Splitting 9s, there's an exception in here, that 7 seems to always pop up. Okay, you're going to split 2 through 9, except for 7. If 7 comes up, you're going to stand. And if the dealer's up card is a 10 or an ace, you're going to stand on that as well. That's a hard 18. Okay, and finally, splitting 10s. According to basic strategy, you always stand. Okay, before you get to counting cards, you need to have basic strategy down cold. Now we have a complete basic strategy chart that you can download on theultimateguidetochasing.com. Okay, moving on. We're going to talk about the high-low system. There are more systems to counting cards. However, the high-low system seems to be what most of the professionals use. Tommy Hyland, the famed MIT team that you saw in the movie 21, and the church team from the movie Holy Rollers, they all use the high-low system. Okay, in the high-low system, this is a lot easier than what people would think. You know, they hear the term counting cards and think that you have to know what every card is in the entire deck in order to be able to succeed, and that's simply not true. The idea of counting cards is to know whether there's more 10s and high cards in the deck than there are low cards. And when there's more 10s in the deck, the odds favor the player over the dealer. Okay, so when you come up here, you take a look, 2 through 6, we count those as +1, because every time one of those cards gets dealt out of the deck, that reduces the amount of low cards and increases, you know, the ratio of high cards to low cards left inside the deck. 7 through 9 is considered to be neutral. We don't count those. And a 10 and an ace, and of course there's a 10, jack, queen, king, those are all 10s. Those count as a -1. And the more of those that leave the deck, the more the odds favor the dealer instead of the player. Okay, now if you take a look over here on the right, this all totals up to 52 cards. You have 20 low cards, 12 neutral cards, and 20 high cards, coming out to 52. The count should always balance out to 0 at the end of the deck. Now, the only other thing that you need to know, and this is probably the hardest part of counting cards, is you're keeping a running count through the deck. Now, most casinos play with multiple decks, so you have to estimate how many decks are left in the shoe. So, if you have a running count of +6 and there's 5 decks left in the shoe, your actual true count is only a little bit over 1. However, if your running count is +6 and there's only 1 deck left in the shoe, then your true count is +6 as well, which means the deck is hot and you should be betting more. Okay, there's advanced play, and we're going to talk about 3 things here. The first thing is something called wonging. This is named after Stanford Wong, and what he would do is he would stand behind and watch the cards play and wait for a hot count to come up. And that way, when the deck gets hot, he would just sit in and start playing cards. And that actually brings us to the next level of advanced play, which is team play. Now, if you've seen the movie 21, this is what these guys did. You would have somebody called a spotter who would sit at the table and just play the table minimum the whole time, waiting for the deck to get hot. And once the deck was hot, they'd signal in the big player who would come in and start laying big money down. And this actually disguises the card counting action, because the biggest tip-off for a pit boss inside of a casino to a card counter is they'll be playing really, really small hands and then just wildly start betting $200-300 a hand. They'll actually take out 2 or 3 hands at once and just bet really big. This is a big tip-off that somebody is counting cards. And when you call in a big player, they're betting big immediately, so it goes under the radar for longer. Now, this is why I like to use progressive systems, because I'm not just increasing my bet when the deck gets hot. I increase it when it's cold as well. And the last thing that I will talk about for counting cards is more advanced systems. And I'm only going to mention one. The most advanced card counting system I know about is something called Wong halves. And this is much more difficult to keep track of than the high-low system. The high-low system, you're just dealing with ones and zeros, and you're going to add one and you're going to subtract one. However, in Wong halves, the 5 cards count as something different, and I believe the 2 card and the ace count as something different, which it makes for a more advanced system, but it's also harder to keep track of. And I think the mistakes far outweigh the advantage that you gain by actually counting with this system. Okay, the final thing that we're going to talk about for counting cards is deviations from basic strategy. Now, basic strategy is simply assuming that you don't know what's coming next. When you're counting cards, you actually have an idea that there's more 10s in a deck, or there are more low cards in a deck. So what happens is you can actually deviate in certain situations because it makes more logical sense and puts the odds higher in your favor. There's a lot of these deviations, and I'm only mentioning roughly 20. I think I have 21 up here, and I haven't even bothered to talk about surrender or insurance. I will leave that to more advanced books if you care to study more. Okay, so we're going to come up here and we're going to look at, I have 3 charts of deviations. Now, over here I have what the count is, and then I'm listing what the situation is on the right. Okay, if the count is below 0 and you have a 12 against a dealer's 4, you're going to hit. Now, normally in basic strategy you would stand in this situation. This is why this is called a deviation. We're actually going to go against what basic strategy is telling you to do. Okay, now this is similar. When the count is below 1 and you have a 13, you're going to hit against the dealer's 2. Normally you would stand. And this is the one that will get some strange looks from those who know basic strategy. You're never supposed to split 10s according to basic strategy. In a +6 situation, you're going to split 10s against a 4. +5, you're going to split 10s against a 5. +4, you're going to split 10s against a 6. And I keep referring to the movie 21. You actually see this happening. That was not a mistake. These guys knew what they were doing. Splitting 10s can actually be very profitable. The reason for this is if you got a dealer's up card of 6 and you have 2 10s and you split, you know there's more 10s in the deck. So you're likely going to beat that 6 because the dealer's going to end up getting a 10 and busting. Therefore, you make twice as much as what you normally would. Okay, on a +3, if you have a 15, you're going to stand on 10. If you have a +5 and you have a 15 versus an ace, you're going to stand. Now, in parentheses, I have in here, you're only going to do this on a game where a dealer can hit on a soft 17. Okay, moving on. In a +4, if you have a 16, you're going to stand versus a 9. Anything above 0, this is an important one to remember because you're going to hit this probably more often than a lot of the other deviations. If you have a 16 versus a 10, you're going to stand. At +3, and you have a 12 versus a 2, you're going to stand. At a +2, you have a 12 versus a 3, you're going to stand. Okay, in our last chart of deviations, at a +1, an ace and a 6 versus a 2, that's a soft 17, you're going to double. At +3, an ace and a 9, that would be considered a soft 19, versus a 4, you're going to double. At +1, with a soft 19 versus a 5, you're going to double. At +1 and a soft 19 versus a 6, you're going to double. At +1, a 9 versus a 2, you're going to double. +6, 8 versus 6, you're going to double. At a +3, 9 versus 7, you're going to double. At a +4, a 10 versus a 10, you're going to double. At a +3, 10 versus an ace, you're going to double. Okay, we're actually going to have a demonstration here. Hopefully this works. As I said before, I use the progressive system when I'm doing card counting. This is a controversial thing. A lot of the math experts will try and tell you the progressive system does not work. However, that's false. Progressive systems don't affect the odds either way. When you have a positive expected value, they work marvelously well. When you have a negative expected value, they eventually will lose. Okay, with that said, let's shuffle the deck a little bit and we'll try this out. Okay. Okay, dealer's up card is a 4. I have a jack and an 8. Now, a 4 counts as a +1. A jack counts as a -1, so the count is currently 0. 8 is neutral. Okay, I would stand on a hand like this. We're going to say that we're betting $10 to start. So I'm standing. The dealer has a 10. That's a 6 and a 4. Okay, the count has just gone to +1. And the dealer has 20. I end up busting, or losing in this case, not busting. So we'll say that we're starting with a bankroll of $10,000. We're now down to $9,990. And what we're going to do is we're going to double our bet. Okay, you have a 16 against a 5. And let's see, our last count ended up being 0 in the end. So these two cancel each other out, and this makes it a +1. So what we're going to do, I'm going to stand on that according to basic strategy.
Okay, dealer has 12. The dealer has 17.
We lose again, and just so we're keeping track of the count. Okay, these two cancel each other out. The count is now +2. We're going to increase our bet again. We're going up to 40. And we have blackjack. Now, blackjack actually pays 3-2 odds. So our $40 bet actually we get $60 in return for that. Okay, I flip this card over, we find out what we have. We have a 19 against blackjack. And we were at +2. So now what we do, this counts as a -1. So that's a +1. This brings us to 0. This brings us to -1. Okay, that was a pretty good demonstration of the martingale system and card counting as well. We had a positive count and ended up getting a blackjack. That's what's supposed to happen. At least the odds are in your favor of that happening when the count goes positive. We ended up with a negative count after that hand, so we're now standing at a -1, and we're going to try another round and see if we can make this work again. Okay, we're going to bet $10. Okay, we have an 18 against the dealer's 2. Basic strategy says to stand on an 18 versus a 2. So we're going to stand, the dealer's going to flip over. Okay, the dealer has an 11. The dealer has to hit and gets a 5. This is now a 16, so the dealer has to hit again. An ace counts as a 1 in this situation, so the dealer now has 17. The dealer has to stand on a hard 17, so we end up winning this round, excuse me. Okay, so let's go over this again. We started with a -1 count. This would be a -2. This is neutral. This is neutral. This is a 1, so that's -1 again. This is a 0 and -1. So we end up at -1 where we started. Okay, we're going to bet $10 again. And let's see what happens. Okay, we have an 18 against the dealer's 10. The count was -1 when we started. So now we count these cards. That would bring it up to -2, -3, and this is neutral, so we're at a -3. We're going to stand. Dealer flips the card. Dealer has 14. The dealer must hit. Dealer has an 18. We have 18. That is considered a push. Okay. Now let's double check, make sure what the count is again before we move on. Okay, we had a -3, then we added this, so this makes it -2, and we're back to -1 again. Cut. Okay, count is -1, we're betting $10 again. Okay, we have a soft 14 against a 4, and we're supposed to hit in this situation. And that's soft 15, hard 15, and we're going to stand. Okay, dealer has a 6, dealer has 9, dealer has 19. Okay, and we started out at -1, so we're just going to go through the cards and see what the count is. That's -2, -3, -4, -3, -2, -1, 0, -1. We're still at -1. Okay, since we lost the last round, we're going to double our bet. So we're betting $20 this time. And we have 19 against the dealer's 5. So we're going to stand. Dealer has 15. Dealer has 22. Dealer busts. Okay, in this short demonstration we made $50 in just a few short minutes. When the count gets really hot, a lot of times I will abandon the progressive system and just start betting heavy. Once the count reverts back down to something low or goes negative, I start using the progressive system again. Okay, in this last section, we're going to talk about the easy money myth. You know, when people get into gambling and they buy gambling products, what they want is basically some system that's just going to magically put money in their pocket. And the unfortunate truth is, if you want to make $1 million, you're going to make $1 million effort. No matter what you do, there's going to be some kind of price that you have to pay, either in learning how to do something or taking a financial risk. So with that said, I'm going to say what I have found to be the easiest things to learn, and I'm going to progress from the easiest to the hardest. And the tendency seems to be naturally that anything that's easier doesn't seem to make as much money, and the things that are harder seem to make more money. Okay, the easiest thing that I have found as far as gambling is to pay for a touting service. And even when you pay for a touting service, you have to use money management. And the best touting service that I've found to date is something called the Sports Cash System. And I got really excited about this when I first got into it. And I made a video on how you could compound your interest and start making $10,000 a month by using their system. And my system was a little too aggressive, because if you continue to use it, eventually they do bust. They are another system that uses progressive systems. And for the first couple of months that I was watching them, you could have quadrupled your money. And then they had a losing streak, which inside of a progressive system, if you lose everything. So if you just kept compounding every time, then you ended up losing everything that you got. However, if you double your money and then start saving just half of your profit, then you're going to continually profit. So with that much said, you need some kind of money management system. No matter how good the touting service is, you're going to have to manage your money, or you will likely go bust. Okay, moving on to the next easiest thing to do would be learn basic strategy and use a progressive betting system. Now, according to the math experts, simple basic strategy alone still leaves the house an edge. It's about 0.44%. And in my initial experiments using the progressive system, I've had quite a lot of success using this. I've read on other people online who have had success as well. However, statistically speaking, in the long term, this should not work. So I will throw that out to you and let you try it out and see what you think for yourself. The next step would become a professional handicapper, and this is very, very time consuming. What you would do is you would develop your systems and research the teams, and over time you're going to get an idea of which teams are better to bet on in which situations. A lot of the professional cappers that I have talked to, they work 60 and 70 hours a week doing research in order to figure out who's going to win. And they run computer programs. There's definitely a lot to it. There's not just a simple answer that's going to make you win all of the time. Now, the system that I demonstrated to you is taking advantage of a trend that is current. Back in the 80s, you actually had a trend that favored the underdogs. And because of this trend, you have a lot of people telling you these days that it's better to bet on underdogs than it is to bet on the favorites. This is a myth. That had to do with the trend that was going on at the time. The trend has actually swapped around. If you made a list of the elite teams like I had showed you earlier, they actually made a 53.9% success rate last year just betting against the spread. The year before, it was actually 57%. Now, these numbers alone are enough to make a small profit. Using progressive systems, they get larger. However, you have to keep track of the trend and make sure that when it swaps that you know what you're doing and you're on the right side of that trend. If you continually bet on favorites and all of a sudden the underdogs start winning again, you're going to lose, and you're going to lose big time. So it's very, very important to stay on top of your information if you want to be a professional handicapper, which is why I say it's easier to pay a touting service than it is to be your own handicapper. Now, when you're paying a professional touting service, another big myth is, well, if their system works so great, why aren't they just using it for themselves and keeping it secret from the public? And the truth behind that is that you can actually make more by selling to the public than you can by using that system. Casinos and sports books don't like winners. I don't care what they tell you on TV. If you get caught counting cards, they'll kick you out of the casino or bar your play. If you make too much money in a sports book, they'll try and stop you or refuse your bets or restrict you to a certain betting size. This makes it very, very difficult for a professional handicapper to make a lot of money, let's say $10 million or so. Well, when you're selling to the public and you're selling a touting service, Dan Gordon's touting service for the NFL goes for $500 a season. Well, you don't have to sell many of those in order to make $10 million. You sell 2 of those, that's $1,000, and for 10 million, let's see, that'd be 20,000, I believe, which is not unreasonable to think that you could sell 20,000 of a working system to the public who wants to know how to bet better, and then they have to worry about the sports books kicking them out, not the actual handicapper himself. So it is a myth. There are handicappers out there that will sell touting services because they can make more money than they can actually betting. Okay, the hardest thing on the list is card counting. And card counting, it takes a lot of time to be able to master the art. A lot of people, they'll read about it, they'll learn it, understand the idea, and then think they can go out to the casino, in a week or two and pull this off. And it's just not the case. You have to practice this so you can do it cold. You have to be able to look at a table of cards and know what the card count is immediately. You can't be thinking about it. You have to know basic strategy cold. You have to know the deviations cold. All of this is going to take a lot of practice. So, with that said, that's what it takes to be an advantage player.